Well, good morning, LifeVantage. Honestly, I can't think of a better place to be than right here with the best people on the planet. Do you agree? Now, I believe, is the best time to be part of LifeVantage. Earlier this week, we announced, I guess we announced it a little earlier, a record quarter for us, 58-point-something million. But what does that mean for you? That means that your businesses, each of you individually and collectively, had your best months in the history of the company. That means the biggest checks and the most success. So congratulations to each of you guys. Because that number is really just a score on what you are doing. Also on Monday, we announced or made an update or updated our forecast or guidance for where we are going for the year. And not only are we projecting that we're going to beat our record year, but that we're going to crush it. So congratulations to you guys. Thank you. It's fun being scorekeeper. That's why I always say it's you guys that we're really reporting on. It's your collective efforts. And it's always a pleasure and an honor to do that. So as a company, we're doing well. But I guess the question would be, as an industry, where are we headed? And it's interesting to me because we have a number of members of our board of directors that are some pretty high-level people. One of them is Darwin Lewis, who was the Chief Customer Officer for S.C. Johnson. S.C. Johnson is, I don't even know how many billion, probably a $20 billion company. We have Vinayak Hedge, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Airbnb. And actually, these two gentlemen are part of what we call the Strategic Planning Committee for the board. So I chair that committee, and then these two gentlemen are on it. And I get a chance to sit and talk to them quite a bit about where we see this industry as well as all business heading. And I believe that we're in a phase which I call the war of the side hustle, meaning that we're competing with multiple companies for the entrepreneurial activity of everyone. And I believe if there's going to be some disruption that comes into our industry, it's going to be from one of these, I call them blitz-scaling companies. These companies that have come in and grown very quickly. And as you can see, Airbnb is represented up there, and we have we have their Chief Marketing Officer on our team helping us plan. And so the other day, I was going to give a talk for the Direct Selling Association, so I gave him a call. Vinayak Hedge with Airbnb, and I started asking him a few questions. And one of the questions that I asked him was, do you see your company as a competitor to direct selling? And his initial response was, no, we're not a competitor. And I said, really? Are you sure that you're not a competitor to us? And he sat there and he paused for maybe 20 or 30 seconds, and he said, well, companies like these right here, he said, our goal or mission in life is to create millions of entrepreneurs. What is your mission? Now, he said that rhetorically because he knows that that's what we do, not only as a company, but as an industry. So he said, in this instance, he goes, I believe that we're direct competitors. And so some of the next questions I began posing to him was, how do we protect ourselves as an industry and as a company from companies like yours? And I won't get into everything that he said. Those are trade secrets. But it made me think, and also from our strategic planning, begin pondering the question of this. What is the engine that drives long-term everything in this industry and is really our competitive advantage? Now, if you think about this question, you'll probably come up with several answers. You may think, well, it's the comp plan. I think that may be part of it. Well, it's the products. Definitely definitely part of it. Events, those play a role. Recognition, a big part of it. But I don't believe that it represents the true competitive advantage that we have. I believe that that is our distributor influencers, okay? That's each of you, but specifically those that we would classify as influencers. Now, what I'd like to do today, I'm normally not the rah-rah style presenter. I wish I was a rah-rah guy sometimes. But I like to teach principles. And when Andy Andrews is always up on the stage, he says, look, I'm not an entertainer, I'm not a motivational speaker, but I teach principles because those can change your lives. So let me teach you a new principle, which I call the influencer conundrum. And if you've been keeping track, on previous events, I've talked about 7 different principles. So this is principle number 8. Now, for those of you who have done opportunity meetings, and how many have been at the front of an opportunity meeting? Okay? You may have drawn this. Whoops, I think I went one ahead. You may have drawn this, right? This is an important thing you want to look at, and this is the most important spot to be. You want to come in right here, right? Does it sound familiar? Okay. Unfortunately, this is just the very beginning of the story. And where the star isn't necessarily the most important part. And what I want to talk to you about is what is one of the most important pieces. It's not where that star is right now, it's where the star is right here. What happens to a company when they get right there and they go through a growth cycle? And much of that is influenced by what happens down here on this line, okay? This is what happens on this line, we call this the influencer line, is really what governs the long-term viability of a company. How many had a chance to go to Eric Worre's GoPro event just recently? Okay, so quite a few of you. His opening talk, he discussed this, and a few weeks after that event, he flew into Salt Lake, and he and I were able to spend about a half a day together in my office, just kind of brainstorming a little bit more through this idea. So a lot of the ideas, I just want to give some credit to him. A lot of these ideas come from his talk too, as well as ideas that we've had as a company. So this line right here is the influencer line. Let me see if I don't even know if you can see a laser clear back there, but anyway, this line right there is the influencer line, and it grows on average about 10% year over year, okay? Now, as a company begins growing in revenue, the disparity between the true influencer line and where the revenue line is a critical piece of the longevity of a company. If the influencers in the company are not growing, then it puts more and more pressure on those influencers as the revenue of the company continues to grow. And at some point, the company begins to correct and go back down to the level of the true influencer, okay? So it always returns to the level of how many influencers you have in the organization. Typically, as a company begins to dip like that, you may have many people that join the company, not many, but in some organizations it may be many, that join the company because I call them momentum junkies. What they do is they look to catch a company just as it's growing. They stay with it a little while, and then as soon as it downturns, bam, they jump, right? And we may have had a few like that, just a few. But, okay, 2. Okay. Did I just speak my internal monologue? I didn't mean to do that. Okay, but for a company this size, that's not bad. Okay, so typically at this point, you begin getting the momentum junkies diving off, because if all you've known is this part, it's like heroin. You can't, from what I hear, you can't get off of it, okay? Just saying. So typically what a company's best option at this point, because if the decline becomes too rapid, too many people start jumping, and when the momentum junkies jump off, if there's too many of them in an organization, it begins to, I don't know, create a stampede, okay? More people begin jumping off, and the company can go into a spiral and go away. What is one of the best results is that a stabilization can occur and that you begin to glide until the influencer line connects again with the revenue line of the company. And hopefully you can keep that up as high as possible. Because then, what typically we don't describe in the company is when the next step happens. Once that line converges again, you're then prepped for another run, okay, of a company. So when we talk about the growth of a company, that we normally just draw that first piece, but really it can be a series of growths that continue to expand and grow the company. And as we talk about legacy companies are the ones that understand this process and continue to grow and go through multiple growth spurts throughout their life cycle, okay? Now, typically this area of growth here lasts on average about 18 months. Now, it can last longer, it can last shorter than that, but on average, it's about 18 months. So let's look at LifeVantage. We began growing very rapidly. You know, we started late 2009, shot up to about 200 million, and then we got a little bit of a downturn. Why? Primarily because the disparity in between the influencers and the revenue were out of alignment, okay? So normally around this time, when it starts dipping, if a company doesn't understand that it's a natural cycle, then all the bells and whistles goes off, red flags are flying, people say, we got to change everything. The comp plan's bad, we need different products, change the management, you know, all of that happens. So most of that happened right here, and I came in around here, okay? Well, I'm glad the company didn't understand it, and they said, hey, change management, and so it was good. Again, I speak my internal monologue, and I should not be doing this. Okay, so my goal was to bring more of a stabilization plan to the company and to create a glide, okay? One of the good things about LifeVantage is that we have incredible products, and we have an incredible number of people on subscription, which creates stability. We have wonderful leaders that typically, many of you have never been in network marketing before, so you didn't even know what a momentum junkie was, okay? So you weren't jumping off. You guys stayed and created a nice glide, and what we were trying to do from a corporate level and a leadership level was to bring in more influencers so that we could change the pitch right here of the number of influencers so that it would connect with the revenue line as quickly as possible. So basically, we did that, and then we ramped it up even more with a red carpet program to even bring in more influencers. And now I would say we're probably, well, if this is the highest we got, then we're probably right up over here is where we're projecting, okay? That's where we're at. So this is where we're at on our process for LifeVantage. But as you can see, it's a series of these lines and waves that go up and down. And this is just probably one of many. So part of why I'm explaining this process to you is that who knows, in 2 years or wherever, we may get another flattening. And it's important that you understand that back here so that you don't get alarmed here and that you begin focusing on this line here, okay? So what is the goal of us at LifeVantage as leaders, as corporate? Our goal right now in this phase is to develop as many influencers in our business as possible, because typically that line, I said, grows at about 10%. You can artificially boost that to a higher percentage through different programs, both external as well as developing more internal leaders. Because if we can make that pitch steeper, that means that we can grow your businesses longer and bigger before the disparity in between those two lines gets out of whack. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's our goal right now. Okay. Now, why is it important to have influencers in your business? And let me put this into dollar terms. I'll define an influencer here in a minute, but typically, as a rule of thumb, if you can get 25 influencers, true influencers in your business, it'll generate a 7-figure income, okay? So that's the goal for us, get 25 influencers in each of your businesses. To do that, we really need to become an influencer-producing juggernaut, okay? Now, you may ask yourselves, are influencers born? I mean, do I have to go out and seek them? Or are they nurtured? And I would have to say that for the most part, they're nurtured. There may be some that are born, just, natural influencers. But for the most part, you can create influencers. So what is an influencer? What are the characteristics of an influencer? Now, at the Grow Pro event, these are some of the characteristics that Eric Worre said, and I like them. Now, they're very qualitative, so it's kind of hard to gauge them or to run a report to determine if there's an influencer in your group. But what he said was, influencers are independent, okay? And they're problem solvers. Quite often, I can tell if somebody's an influencer if I'm talking to their group or if I'm talking to them, and they said, I think we needed this piece, like this brochure, for our business to grow, and we've been waiting for a year for you to produce it, so we're just hanging out here, right? All I know is if it was my business, man, I'd be making whatever I needed to do in order to move that business forward. So they're independent, they're problem solvers, they're consistent. They create action where action would not have occurred otherwise. And they have a big vision. These were the 5 kind of qualitative items that Eric had said really identify who an influencer is, and I agree with that. But there was also one qualifying piece to it. They had to be hungry, okay? And I think hunger is what drives all the other qualities. And for those of you that have been in the business for a while, think back to when you first got into it. How hungry were you at that time? As I listened to Scott Satterfield just out on the stage, he was talking about his hunger and desire that was moving him forward, and I've heard most of you leaders talk about yours. And it's that hunger that I think is the activation of all those other characteristics. So from a LifeVantage standpoint, how are we defining or trying to track influencers in our business? I think one of the steps to be an influencer on a corporate level, to have a corporate-wide or a cross-line influence, I think you need to become an elite. So we've got a lot of elites here in the business, but I think you can be an influencer in your own organization at a lower level. But to really have that broad influence across lines and across the company, you need to be an elite. I think you need to be enrolling monthly. You need to have a new person mentality. And this new person mentality is kind of like that hunger, that you're in that producer mode, okay? I think you need to be an expert at building Pro 3s in your organization. You need to be able to create and follow systems. So if your organization has a system, follow it, okay? If your organization doesn't have a system, then you need to create one, okay? I think you need to be consistently rank advancing. Now, this isn't meaning that you have to be jumping every month. Heavens no. Justin was just giving some numbers yesterday to the elites, saying on average it's about 22 months to reach Pro 7. So, I mean, if you're working towards those ranks, it does take some time. I think they have to qualify for incentive trips. Incentive trip qualification is a huge indicator of, I think, an influencer. And then attend events, okay? Event attendance is non-negotiable. So these are some of the things that as a company, we are looking and developing systems to begin tracking and trying to identify who are true influencers in an organization. So as you think about the 5 that Eric gave of the characteristics and these, I think you need to pose to yourself the question, am I an influencer? And do I possess the characteristics that have been described? Okay. Was that Bert? If it was, you're loud, Bert. But, oh no, that was Bert over there. I recognize that voice. Okay. So, and then if you do have these characteristics, I think you need to ask yourself the question, am I hungry? Because I think a lot of us have the characteristics, but lack the hunger. And that may be dependent upon what phase of the business you're in right now. Now you may say, well, what do you mean what phase? Well, there are 4 phases or so to the distributor life cycle. And the first phase could be described as the producer mode. This is when you're early into the business, you're working, you're hungry, you're building, you're actively just outgrowing. And typically, again, as a rule of thumb, this lasts for about 3 years on average, okay? Then many people, now part of this is out of necessity, as their group grows, moves to manager mode. Now, I'm not saying you have to always stay in manager mode, but sometimes there's a balance in between producing and managing as your organization gets longer, as it gets bigger. Then, I believe, the third phase, and each one of these is one step removed from the producer phase, is the overseer, okay? You don't want to become the overseer of the managers of the producers, okay? Because it's just another phase away. And never, under any circumstances, do you want to become stage 4, which is the dreaded galactic overlord phase, okay? Then you're the overlord of the overseers, of the managers, of the producers, okay? Now, one thing that I always hear Marcel Niederhauser say, and I've been in a lot of meetings with him, when people say, well, I'm having a hard time with this or that, or my business is slowing down, he always says, well, go out and bring in 5 people. And it seems like an easy response, bring in 5. And what I think he's trying to say is, get out of galactic overlord and move into producer mode again, right? Because that's really what it is. Go out and bring in new people. That's the answer to many things, okay? So what I need you to ask yourself is, okay, so who on my team has these characteristics? Because again, they're very important because it can determine where your entire organization goes. And how can I identify them? Okay, so who on my team, and I want you to think about this, who on your team truly are influencers? And I need you to be honest with yourself because that's the first step. How many influencers do you truly have in your organization? And are they balanced? Are they all on one leg? Or are they kind of spread out? Because you want them kind of spread out. How can you identify them? Who are they? Because the goal, again, is to create 25. Because if we can create 25 in your organization, that can help you achieve a 7-figure income. So how do I become an influencer? Count the number that are in your organization, but you also need to be asking yourself the question, if I'm not an influencer, how can I become an influencer? Now, this idea or this concept of being an influencer is really what we're focusing on at this event. We want to help you both develop and become a true influencer. Now, you may ask yourself, okay, so how do I do that at this event? Well, I would say first, listen closely to the speakers, because each of the topics that we've set up for the leaders, most of them tie back in specifically to the idea of creating an influencer. For instance, let me go over some of the talks. We've got Rye Fry. Where's Rye? Okay, I heard a woo back there. He's talking about how influencers build with purpose. We've got Kai Hayes. Kai? She's talking about breaking through barriers, the influencer mindset. Bob Wagner is talking about the importance of staying new. Now, for him, the importance of staying new is staying in producer mode. That's what he's going to talk about. And Bob's been in the business 27 years, and he's in producer mode, okay? So probably not anybody better to talk about that subject than him. Jenny Crane and Scott Satterfield are covering how influencers present, okay? Tim Cox and Brandon Cunningham, developing influencers, growing from manager to leader, okay? Rachel Jackson and Kim Kubinski, becoming a social media influencer. That ought to be a really great one. We've got Tracy and Russell Blanche and Michelle Poe, influencers and the art of promoting. See how many more I got? Cassie Teal and Fred Graves, launching your business as an influencer. Are you getting the pattern here? A lot of influencers here. Brian and Holly Highfield and Everett Schilling. And by the way, when Everett gets up on stage, you're going to think, who is that guy? He's lost a ton of weight. Congratulations, Everett. Back to the basics, creating and following systems, very important. So, developing influencers, that is the key, because we want that line, again, that influencer line, as steep as possible, and we want it growing as long as possible so that we can keep the revenue, which is really the amount of volume going through the system, going as long and as high as possible. Because unfortunately in this industry, too many people simply survive. And our goal is that we want you to thrive, okay? And it's really a blessing to me and all of our corporate staff to be your business partners on your road to success and helping you thrive. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.